and welcome back to our fashion how-to series. In this video I'm going to show you how to apply straight facings. I've got my facing, my piece of calico and my piece of interfacing, and just as before, just remembering to put it on a piece of scrap paper to save your ironing board and to make sure that the glue dots are in contact with the back of your work. Again, putting the paper over the top of your work just to protect your iron, blasting the steam from the iron and using heat and pressure to help to apply that interfacing to the calico. And remember that you have to use sufficient heat and sufficient pressure to make sure that there's a good bond between the interfacing and your work. And you can just sort of check that by just perhaps running your fingernails along just to make sure that that's attached. Before we stitch our facing onto our garment, we'll just need to overlock one long edge of our facing, because the other edge is going to be enclosed in the seam. Making sure you don't cut any of the fabric off with the blade and making a chain afterwards. Cutting the threads with a pair of scissors. So now we are ready to stitch our facing onto our garment sample. We are going to position the facing with right sides together, and we're going to pin and stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So just as you did before. If you're not sure what a 1 centimetre seam allowance is, make sure you always use the tape measure, and even if you think you know, it's always a good idea just to check. Check their level. Hold on to these threads so they don't get tangled under your work. Back tack and take the pins out as you go and put them in your pin pot or pin cushion. And back tack. Just make sure that the pulley is in the upright position. Knee lift, raise the presser foot, move your work away from the machine and then snip with the scissors. So the facing, we need to turn our work to the wrong side or to the inside, and then we're going to push the seam allowance up towards the facing. And what we're going to do is just give that a little bit of a tug just to make sure it's fully open, and then take the iron, blast the steam from the iron, and then we're going to press that seam allowance up towards the facing. So now we've pressed our seam allowance towards the facing, we're going to turn the work to the right side. Now we're going to do something called understitching. And understitching is a line of stitching that we'll do on the facing itself, and it'll stitch through the seam allowance at the same time. And we stitch that line of stitching just about 2 millimeters away from the seam. To start off with, you could probably just place a pin about 2 millimeters away from that edge, just so that you can see what it looks like. And so if you keep an eye on the position of the foot in relation to the seam you've already made, you know you're going to stitch in the correct place. So hold on to those threads so that they don't tangle underneath your work. And we're just going to do a back tack just to secure the work, and then we're just going to stitch that line, take the pin out because we don't need that anymore. And I'm just keeping an eye on, say, on that position of the foot and the seam we've already stitched. I'm just going to back tack, make sure that the pulley's in the upright position, knee lift, raise the presser foot and bring the work to one side, and then we can snip off threads, turn off the machine. So this is your line of understitching. So if I turn it over, I'll just show you that that is the original seam line here, and this is your understitching line here. So if you can see that we've actually stitched through the facing and through the seam allowance at the same time. And what we will do is to press the facing to the underside of the garment, so that when you have your garment you cannot see any stitching and it keeps everything nice and neat. And it's the understitching that will prevent the facing from rolling to the front of the garment. And then give that a good press. So here we have a really nice neat finish to our garment sample. So there's the facing on the inside of the garment, and there's a lovely neat finish to your work.